So, I don't really have much of an idea what I'm going to do this time. I guess what I'm going to do is go back to our number guessing game, which we made last video. And if I run it with my Control R, this is the old one. You'll notice if you enter numbers and it just goes on forever and it's kind of boring. If you enter a string like I did there, see I put in a space, so like I'm bashing the space bar right now, and I'm gonna put in a word like Bob, and I press enter. It'll give me that error message because it doesn't know what to do with Bob, because it asks for input, which is please guess a number. So we're saving input as last guess, and last guess is supposed to be an integer, which is a number, not a floating point number like 7.6 or something like that, but like 7, an actual just a number. So that's what it's looking for. And when we run it and we type in nothing, or we type in a word like Bob, or even if we were to type in a word like 7, none of that does it know what to do with. So that's an issue with this game. And then also another issue that I have with this game is the numbers. You get infinite guesses. It just goes on forever, which is boring in my opinion. So I made another version, which you guys have all the information you needed in the last video to make this other version. So I'm going to show you mine. So first I'm just going to run it without really showing you much of the code. So the first thing it does is print this number, which is the actual number. That's of course not going to be in the finished project, but it's because I was just playing around with it. I'll keep that in there for now. But that's just the random number, so I know what it is for testing purposes. So this is my first guess out of 10, so it says 110. So I'm going to guess 12. It's going to tell me I guessed too low. I'm going to guess 15, and it's going to tell me I guessed too high. And then I'm going to guess 15 a bunch more times. And you'll see I'm on my 10th guess, and I'm going to guess 14. And it says I won, and I took 10 guesses. So on my very last guess, I did win. So it actually has a timeout now. So I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to guess numbers. And for some strange reason, I guess, 3 7s, or, my secret number. So the game will now say that I found my secret number, and it has to give me a hint now, and it'll tell me a range of the number, which I know it's 460, and it says it's somewhere between 457 and 475. So that makes it so in 10 guesses I can guess much faster what this number is, considering it's 0 to 1000, as you can see there. So that's that part, and I'll start guessing again. And that did count as a guess as well, the 777. And that number could be anything. It could even technically be a word if I wanted it to. So I'm going to guess some more stuff. I'm going to fail again. So there you go. You lost. The number was 460, which is another thing the old one didn't do when you lost. You didn't know how close you were. This one, it'll tell you what the number was. The other thing is, if you don't enter anything at all, or you enter a word like Bob, it catches that and it'll ask you to enter an integer, and it gives some examples. However, you can enter negative integers by default, which I went ahead and canceled that out because I'm not using negatives. So you have to enter a positive number or 0. So that's that cool part. The other thing I can do is that random guess thing. So if I enter 777, it says that it has to give me a hint now. So that's nice. It gives me a hint. But you'll notice that if I'm on my 10th guess and I enter 777s, it'll say a similar thing, but now it says, instead of this line here, it says it has to give me a hint now, not that it matters, since this was my last guess anyway. So it tells me the range, but yet it really doesn't matter because I can't even make a guess. That was my last guess. So it's a variable there, which all of this except the error catching I taught you guys the first video. The only thing I didn't teach you was how to catch like letter exceptions, but everything else I did teach you. So I'll just kind of go through the code now. The first thing is pretty much the same as our last program. There we go. So the first thing I did was I just changed the range for the number, which is pretty simple, and you guys probably already messed with that. Everything else is pretty much the same. I printed the number just so I can know what it is for testing purposes, which I don't really need that anymore because I can actually play the game from now on. Speaking of, I lost the game. If you guys, play that game, well, I lost it, and now you did too. I mean, everything's pretty much the same until you get into the actual game loop, which is all of this fun stuff, which, in our other game was only a couple lines. So the first thing I did was I formatted it a little bit different. I'm printing the amount of guesses we have, so the first turn it's going to say 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, etc. And then the next thing I did was right after we get last guess equals input, which is, guess again, it'll check with a function in Python called isDigit. And this basically means, is it a number? It means, is it 0? Is it 0.0? Is it anything that's a number? Even if it's a variable, sometimes that is a number. Not if the person would, let's say the person entered guesses, that's a number, but when they enter the word guesses, that wouldn't be that number. IsDigit can be used for more complicated things later on, but basically it just checks if it is a digit, if it's a number. So if it is a number, it'll say true. This will be true. So if it's a number, it will be true equals false, which is not a true statement, so it won't run this line, and it'll make last guess equal to the integer of that input. However, if last guess isDigit evaluates to false, then while false equals false is true, so it'll run this statement here, which will ask me once again for the input, and it'll prompt me for an integer. So if I enter something, it will go back to the top and evaluate again with the new last guess and check if it's a digit. If it's not, because we entered another thing that's invalid, it will run the loop again and again and again and again and again until the user enters a number. And then once they enter a number, it exits this little while loop, and it'll just make that number the number we're working with. The next thing I did was I did a bunch of evaluations on last guess to check what it is. So the first check is, of course, checking if it's the secret number. If our last guess is the secret number, well, then you won. And if guesses is equal to 1, so for instance, if I removed the guess. Basically, in our old program, if you guess the correct number in one guess, it will say you won in 1 guesses, which is grammatically incorrect. So this if statement basically checks if it's 1 guess, then you took 1 guess. Otherwise, it will print guesses because it's plural. The next thing I did was I set guesses equal to 12, which is just enough to break the while loop. Less than or equal to 10. So the highest number it will get to naturally is 11. So by making it a 12, we know that you won the game. There wasn't any kind of error. You won legitimately. And then I exit the while loop. Just like over here, I exit the while loop. The next thing I'm checking for is whether or not your guess was the secret number, which is 777 or 878 or, anything you type in there. That's a number. It could be a word, but since we did this check up here, the word would never get through, so you'd never be able to guess the secret word because it wouldn't let you put in a secret word. You could instead put the if statement up here, like if it's not a digit, then check if it's the secret word. If it's the secret word, then you could tell the user something special. But the way I structured it, I used a number as the secret number. And then I'll check if your guess is less than 10. If it is less than 10, well then I'll have to give you a hint. If it's more than 10, or it is 10, well then it doesn't matter anymore, so I'll just print that it doesn't matter anymore. Which, it's not essential, but it just makes the game a little bit more interesting. This first and last line will always print. The only thing that's variable is this middle part, which is an evaluation. If it's 10 or less, then you print the hint. If it's 10 or more, you print that statement. And then lastly, I check if it is less than or greater than. And that's when I give the little generic hint. You guess too high or you guess too low. The other thing you might notice is when you guess 777, it's not, the range isn't like minus 20 plus 20. It's based on random numbers. So it's anywhere in between 0 and 20. It'll add or subtract that to the secret number. So the low number is anywhere from 0 to 20 minus the secret number, and the high number is anywhere from 0 to 20 in addition to that number. And it makes it so if someone knows how the game works, they can't always know after they guess 777. Because if you just did minus 20 and plus 20, then they'd take the first number, add 20 to it, and then they would know for a fact that the secret number is 20 more than that lowest number. But this way it keeps it so you can't cheat that way. And then everything else is pretty much the same. Guesses plus equals 1 at the end. The only thing I did differently was right before this input, which is after the game's done. So while not done, that exits the game loop. After you exit the game loop, you go here, which is the input section, which freezes the game so you can see all the pretty pictures and read everything, so the window doesn't close all by itself. So instead of just pausing, I went ahead and did one last check. I checked if guesses was equal to 11. If it is equal to 11, that means you naturally expired, as in you guessed 10 times. So after, let's say this is your 10th guess. So while not done and guesses is less than or equal to 10. So based on the while loop, if that's true, your last guess, it will run all of this stuff. And after you guess, you're either going to win or you're not going to win. If you win, guesses is going to be set to 12. Otherwise, guesses is going to go down here and it's going to add 1 to 10, which will make it 11. It'll go back up to the while loop and it'll say, is guesses or is 11 less than or equal to 10? And it'll say no. And then it'll get down here. And if guesses is equal to 11, you lost, and then the number was. However, if you guessed the number, then guesses would be 12. Guesses less than or equal to 10? No, it's 12. But it's not 11, so it doesn't print a lost message on top of my you won message. You can copy the code if you want, play around with that. You'll understand what I mean if you don't currently. I don't want to spend too much time on that, since I think most people will be able to understand what that part is. And that is my version of the guessing game, using everything I taught you guys already except for the input check, just making sure there's no errors, so somebody doesn't type something in that crashes the game, because it's always somewhat disappointing when you're showing someone and the first thing they do is type in this is a dumb game, which they'd be right if it broke the program, but your program, it's smarter than that. It's not a dumb game, it's a smart game. It's still dumb in concept, but it's smart enough to not break easily, which makes it entertaining. And now I can finally close that window, because it's been sitting there bugging me for weeks on end, because I just haven't gotten around to making any videos. This is the next thing I'm going to do on here. It's just an example program with different syntax things. Once you know this stuff, you can typically just make programs. Of course, you need some guidance, because most people can't just think of things off the top of their head that they want to program. But theoretically, once you know the syntax, anything you can think of, you can program. Theoretically. It's not quite as easy as it sounds. But I'll just cover that in the next video, and I'll see you guys later. Be sure to tell your friends how stupid these videos are, and that they should waste their life and their time watching them just like you.